Hi, I'm Stargate Pioneer.
And I'm Steven Jondrew, and we're from Better Podcasting, a proud member of the Gonna Geek Network.
Just like the show you're listening to now.
The opinions expressed are those of the individual host.
Check out all the other podcasts at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
And get ready, because geekiness begins in 3,
2,
1.
Talk hard and enjoy the mindgasm. The IntelleXual Podcast starts now.
Welcome back to another episode of the IntelleXual Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Dawson.
And Steven Schwartz.
And we're on a train heading to Portland, Oregon, where we're going to attend the Oregon Cinema Arts Film Festival, where we have 2 films screening, Tossed Aside
and Forever My Love.
Forever My Love. And we're very, very proud of both films, and I'm personally super excited to screen them in front of an Oregon audience.
Yes, something out of state.
Yeah, and see how they take it on both films.
Yeah. So we started out at 10 o'clock this morning. Actually, the train did. Our day started at 5 a.m.
Yeah. It's a 30-hour train ride.
Yes.
But it's been really pleasant. We've seen some beautiful coastline. And,
absolutely gorgeous.
We actually rolled past Vandenberg Air Force Base.
That was cool.
Got to see the SpaceX launch towers and stuff.
Yes.
So really neat. And we've got power at our seats, so we were able to run our laptops and our phones. And
it's amazing that
it's nice and comfortable.
Right. It's amazing that coach on a train is far more roomier and comfortable. It has more amenities than an airline.
Yeah, airlines suck.
Yeah.
But they are faster.
Yes, they are. We would have been there already.
Yeah, but we're getting to stop and smell the roses essentially this way. You know, the other thing that I really love about the train is the dining car.
Oh, yeah.
Because you end up sitting with other passengers on the plane at your table, and it's a chance to actually break bread with people from around the world.
Literally. Yeah.
So our lunch, we sat with a Chinese foreign exchange student who was studying at UCSB, and her mom, who was here visiting her, and that was delightful. And then at dinner, we sat with a gentleman from Northern California here, and a kid from Japan.
Who, oddly enough, was traveling the coast, going to ball games, going to baseball games.
Yeah, he'd been to Dodger Stadium, and he was on his way up to Seattle to go to, what is it, is that the CenturyLink?
I think it's for the Mariners, Seattle Mariners. I don't know what their stadium's called.
But yeah, he's making his way up and down the coast, attending baseball games.
He could, see a AA game in Portland, the Portland Beavers. That's an actual team.
Yeah. Okay. No,
I used to live in Portland, so
I know. It's like a homecoming for you. So we're going to be putting this episode out from the train. So the modern technology, I'm going to be able to actually put this episode together on my laptop and upload it via my hotspot on my phone. And the podcast will come out this week, regardless of the fact that I am not in my studio. So
no, and the noises that you'll hear are actual passengers going to and from, the noises from the train.
Yeah, the noises that you're hearing right now. You won't hear them during the interview. Today's interview is with Malia from Macabre Mondays, and Whitney and I went up to Pasadena to interview her a week ago. And I got to tell you, Steve, it's one of the more fascinating and interesting interviews we've had in a while.
Well, for someone who hasn't heard this interview, can you give me a little bit of a preview of who she is?
I met her on the podcasting panel at Comic-Con.
Awesome.
She's the host of Macabre Mondays. She goes around Los Angeles and also other places. She just completed a run in Australia, but she goes around and visits old buildings and interesting places that have rumors of hauntings and spiritual energy and stuff. And she researches the locations, she knows their stories, and she shares those stories on Macabre Mondays. And it's fascinating. And we start the conversation off talking about her show and what she does.
Who's her sponsor that she do all this traveling?
And it dovetails into like this incredible discussion about spirituality and science. And,
science.
I mean, it was just incredible and such an intellectually stimulating conversation.
Nice how you slip that in.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so we're going to jump right into it. We're gonna play the interview for you. You're going to love it, I guarantee you. And if you're enjoying the podcast as you're listening to it, remember that you can hear a lot more very entertaining and very interesting shows at the Gonna Geek Network, of which we are a proud part of, at GonnaGeek.com. And support other podcasts besides our own, and grow your listening habit.
Yes.
There's a lot of hours in the day to fill with things to listen to.
Certainly. I listen to many podcasts on my very long commute to and from work.
Yeah. I think listening to podcasts while driving is one of the best things in the world.
Yeah.
And we're on a train. You can listen to it when you're on the train too, if you're a New Yorker or a Chicagoite?
The Chicagoan.
If your commute is the train, man, it's a great place to listen to podcasts. So keep listening to the IntelleXual Podcast, and while you're at it, check out GonnaGeek.com for much more content at the Gonna Geek Network. And now it's Malia on the IntelleXual Podcast.
Hello there, citizens. I am the terror that flaps in the night. I am the floaty that will not flush no matter how many times you try in the toilet bowl of crime. I am Darkwing Duck, telling you please, talk hard and enjoy the mindgasm. Whatever the heck that means. After all, you are watching IntelleXual Podcast with your ears.
So we were just discussing the fact that our names are alliterations. I have Whitney Wegman. We have David Dawson. And I'm not even going to try yours because yours is so tongue-twistery.
Malia Miglino.
Malia Miglino, exactly.
But the full name is?
Malia Margita Miglino Wolf.
Yeah.
The wolf is kind of you kind of like jump off a cliff.
It's like a hyphenated.
Yeah,
so it's connected to the previous.
Exactly.
Your initials wouldn't be with a W at the end.
Yeah, exactly.
It's an upside down M, David.
I think I'm a kiss.
There you go.
It's MMMW, so it's like mwah.
I love it.
David Sean Dawson. I was dissed at birth.
Oh no. And it just took a sad turn.
Mine would be Woo. Like whenever I used to play video games, it's W-E-W. Woo.
So you're the epitome of the woo girl.
Woo. Wow. So, we are here to interview you at this lovely coffee house. First of all, I have to say, love the outfit that's going on.
Thank you very much.
The skull accessories seem incredibly appropriate. We have a macabre skull purse.
Is incredible.
Well, and did you check out this lovely skull ring?
Oh yeah, it's a little ridiculous.
So, and the reason, of course, that's appropriate is because you have a haunted show, a ghost show.
I do.
Macabre Mondays.
Macabre Mondays, yes. My show is Macabre Mondays, yes. It's interesting. So a lot of people think it's a ghost hunting show, and I don't hunt ghosts. Like I've never even held an EVP monitor. I'm not saying I'm above it. Like I've been invited to do a lot of ghost hunts around the country, which I plan on doing someday.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a blast. It's just definitely not something that I set out to do initially because I love so many of the shows and I wanted to be a little bit different. So I am a little bit more history based, but a huge portion of my show is talking about, is this place haunted? And what is the history that could back up these supposed hauntings?
Yeah, why would it be? Like, what's the justification?
Yeah.
What made you decide to do a show like that? Like, what inspired?
Oh boy. It kind of starts from me being a super young tot and just being obsessed with all things creepy and weird. I've always been, like, my grandma's house was extremely haunted. I grew up in a Victorian fourplex that had a lot of activity. It was something that was very active in my household and in the beliefs that I grew up with. And I was a frustrated actor, wasn't getting enough auditions, wanted to create content for myself, didn't know how, didn't know what to do that would be different that I could care about. And my friend just she had the idea of me doing themed videos each week. And so my first thought was I'll do a show called Macabre Mondays, and I'll finally have a platform and a space to start talking about these weird things that I like. So I'd pick locations, because it was just that, you know when you're walking down the street, you see that really weird house. And you're like, something feels weird. I don't know what's weird about it. Like, I've never seen it on a show. I don't know what it is.
My mom called those the moo-moo places.
So the moo-moo places, when you're seeing the moo-moo places, I wanted to know what makes it that. Like, did something actually happen? Is there something that could back up this weird feeling I got from places? So that's what I decided to do the show on, and yeah, it kind of just grew from there.
So I gotta back this up for a second, because you mentioned growing up, you lived in a haunted place, and that even whenever you got your own place, that you felt it was a haunted place. What, can you share any ghost experiences that you had growing up?
Well, it's interesting because I've never personally, so I have to this day never actually seen like an apparition or a ghostly figure. I am way more energy based. So I, as a child, apparently, according to my parents, I would consistently talk about people talking to me in my room. And until I was 13, I would sleepwalk out of the bedroom that I grew up in because it terrified me so much. My parents eventually ended up swapping bedrooms with me, and I never had the issue again. But even until I left that house at 18, I was terrified of that bedroom. So again, I can't tell you why. I used to have recurring dreams of somebody in my closet, not like a monster, like a very distinct little boy. And I would have dreams of him hiding either on my dining room table or in my closet. And
you're like giving me chills.
Yeah, it's very odd. And actually, that is something that has followed me into adulthood. And I was told by a psychic friend of mine, I was having coffee with her actually up the street one day, and she kept looking to the left of my shoulder. And I kept noticing it because every time I saw her, she looked to my left of my shoulder. And finally I was like, what is it? And she's like, I don't know if I should tell you. I'm like, no, I would like you to tell me. Like, if you're sensing something, tell me. And she said that, and she didn't know anything about my past and my apartment that I grew up in. And she basically said something has followed you from your apartment that you grew up in. And it's a male energy, it's a young male energy. And he doesn't like when other males are around you. And it checked out on so many levels. And instantly I'm like, I know I dreamt of this. I know I dreamt of this boy. So for me, every family member that's ever died, I believe, has come to me in dreams a day or two after they passed. So I think my suspicion about myself is I am purposely blocking out seeing something while I'm awake, and I think they are approaching me while I'm dreaming because I'm more open to it. Because for me, I'm a full-blown believer. I don't need to see it to believe it.
But part of you is like, I don't really want to see it. That would freak me out real bad.
Absolutely. It's this moment of, and I think eventually maybe I'll get to that point, but as of now, I don't know if I need that confirmation. Like, I can feel it, but I don't know if I need to see it.
So, considering that you've had all of these experiences growing up, did you ever have any urge to investigate the history of that place that you grew up and find out any verification on this?
I get asked that all the time, and it's the one place I haven't researched yet because I am that terrified.
You're like, I don't really want to know. I don't want to know that this is real.
And the place has been, my childhood home has since been torn down and they've rebuilt on the site, but I have, for a long time, actually since I started my show, thought about turning that into its own episode, because I've never talked about this on my show in any way. So I'm curious about going on that journey to like figure it out and see if it matches up, and then...
Does it frighten you?
It frightens me deeply.
What is it about it that frightens you about it?
It's not a good energy. I don't know how else to describe it. It feels, and I can sense when it or him or whatever you want to call it is around. And especially the apartment I live in now, it's definitely a transitional place. Things definitely pass through. There's nothing there consistently, but I can walk in and I can know, okay, there's something here, and I'll smudge and I'll talk to him like, hey, I get it, but like leave me alone. So I'm terrified because usually it's nice energies I feel, or I'm not threatened by them. This is an energy I very much feel uncomfortable with and feel threatened by very much.
And it's comfortable with you. It knows you very well.
Yeah.
So, but both yourself and the psychic that you know, feel that it's a child's energy? Or do we think it's something manifesting as a child, but is?
I think it could be. I don't actually believe it as a child. I don't think it'd be as possessive over me if it was just a child. Because I don't feel there's any mother-son anything there. It feels like very much a very possessive male energy that I think because I started having these dreams as a child presented itself as a child, so maybe I would feel less threatened by it, which is even more creepy. God. Yeah, I just got chills.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting question for you. Do you think that growing up in a house that has that kind of intense energy made you more attuned to the energy, or do you think you were born attuned to the energy to begin with? Do you think you'd be the person you are today if you'd grown up in a different house that didn't have that kind of intense energy in it?
That's a really good question. I mean, when I used to talk about, like, there was a church up the street, and when I was starting to form sentences and like thinking, like, not 3. I very clearly told my parents, like, I got married in that church. And they're like, what? And they're like, yeah, I got married in that church. And I was defiant about it. And I had an imaginary boyfriend for about 4 years, claiming it was that same guy. So I don't know if it's related, but that is something that I don't know where that would have been introduced to me. The church wasn't even an active church anymore. And I was so young. So I think as I grew up, it was definitely not a thought process or belief that was hindered, and so I think I started developing onto it because of the environment. But I think it's something that I was born with, so to speak, and it might have been because I was born in that area and lived there, and maybe there was some weird cosmic reason why I seem to kind of still be placed in a very close vicinity to where possibly if I had that in a previous life, I had done something, married somebody, I don't know.
Well, it sounds like your parents didn't try and stifle that either. Like I feel like a lot of kids are very sensitive to things like that. Like you hear kids, they have imaginary friends, and then they start telling you details about these imaginary friends, and you go, oh, that's a little specific.
Well, I've got 4 young nephews, and I had 2 younger sisters. And across the board, with all of them, in infancy into toddlerhood, I'd see them just laying on the bed sometimes, giggling, laughing, and reacting like they're touching to somebody, tickling them, and talking to them and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I personally have never felt any of that kind of energy anywhere. Maybe I'm just not attuned to it, but I don't disbelieve. I believe in the kind of cosmic universe. We're all connected, and our energy continues to exist. Energy doesn't go away, right? So I firmly believe that the possibility is there, but I think children can be especially attuned to it.
Yeah.
I think partially because they're still so close to their creation, which means they're still technically close to that moment where the universe put them into a physical form.
Yeah.
I think there may just be a residual capability to kind of see the extra energy in the universe.
Well,
and they haven't put any societal blocks in.
Yeah, nobody's told them that that's weird yet.
Yeah.
Nobody's been like, you see people,
but
you're crazy.
I've seen it in every one of my nephews, and I saw it in both of my sisters growing up.
That's so fascinating.
So,
So maybe the fact that nobody stifled that and told you were crazy helped you continue to stay open to it.
Yeah. I think it's very, very, very possible. And it's weird because on my mom's side of the family, it's pretty much all females. And all of them have had some sort of weird, psychic's a really loose term, but they've had some kind of sensitivities. My mom used to, when she was a teenager, she had a dream journal because she would have straight up premonition so often her mom wouldn't believe her. She started writing down all of her dreams, and it was consistent, people would come into her life and she'd see them, and it was all while she was living in this one house, my grandma's house. I hated that house. That house was very disturbing. I didn't like that house at all. And I grew up, I never really experienced anything odd in the house besides this horrifying feeling. But my mom, her sister, everybody was terrorized by that house. So it was not a great place to go for the night when you were being babysat.
I bet.
Was never that happy about it.
Well, so you had these experiences growing up, and you still sort of carry the sensitivity, and now you're doing this show. And of course, like you said, it's more history based. So what have you found while you were researching? Did you find anything where you had a feeling of it, and then you found the history, and it's bam, backed it up completely?
Oh, absolutely. And there was this, it's one of my very first episodes. When I first started the show, I did it on this place called the Georgetown Castle in Seattle. And it was just kind of this old Victorian that's in the middle of nowhere, like basically in an industrial park now. And I was obsessed with it, like my whole life, and I could never, like, this is before really the internet was the source that it is.
Wait, how did you know it was there?
Because my parents and we would drive around, and my dad's a musician, and he'd have gigs in the area because there's random bars. And I was always dragged along to these things as a little nugget. And finally, when I started the show, I thought, like, that's gonna be one of my first episodes. I'm gonna figure out what it was. And, like, yeah, sure as hell, like, a couple of babies were killed there and buried underneath the front steps. And, like, yeah, I mean, it's like a deep, dark history. And it was just this very validating. I think growing up, that's when I had probably the most validation, is because these places that I would see my entire life. And because down here, I've only been here, half as long as I lived in Seattle. So it's not, I haven't had these years and years of wandering. And there was also there's this town called Snohomish, and there's a little old town Snohomish up in Washington. This beautiful tea shop, and down the street there's this old hotel, and they had like shops. They renovated the top to all these shops, and it's this really steep, like old Victorian staircase you have to walk up to get to these shops. And every time I attempted to go up the stairs, I couldn't do it. Every part of me was like, stop, like you're not allowed up here. And so I've never gone upstairs. And so again, I went back and researched it, and it's like, oh yeah, it used to be a brothel. A couple of prostitutes were killed there, and people actively feel like you're not welcome, especially females.
Wow.
So I don't know if it's a protective thing, as far as like other, like maybe the female spirit saying don't come up here
because bad things will happen to you.
Yeah. So that was really, really kind of interesting and validating. So those were like big personal wins for me, because I had been so curious for so many years, and when I finally started researching, I did feel very validated. But honestly, for me, what ends up happening more, especially with Los Angeles, because most of my episodes take place here, is there's just such a rich history in LA. And what I love most about it is so many buildings are still here. Like the fact that Olvera Street is still there, and you can go to the Pico House and all these beautiful establishments. Like I can read about these people, and then you can go to their homestead, and that's such, and then you can go to the cemetery that they're buried at. Like all of those things are so incredible to me. Like I love, like the city of Temple was named for the Temple Ranch. So you can go to the homestead, then you can go to Arlington Heights and go see the Temple family plot. Like, and it's just, it's a way to connect everything to me that I love so much, because when you start researching, when you can still see it, it really becomes living history. Especially if you go to these places and you feel something, it's like, I know your entire life story now, and it's like, am I feeling you? Because I've seen your storyline now play out. I've walked in your footsteps, and like, it becomes this really kind of, I don't know, like using the word friend is probably a weird word, but there's so many people I've become obsessed with, and I would love to have met. So it's cool to be able to get as close as I possibly could. So that's
I think it's an interesting thing too. Our people's memories of you are kind of how you continue on. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, the research, the ability to tell these people's stories, why they died, how they died, where they died, why people think that place continues on with them, is another way of continuing their energy in the universe, which is kind of an interesting thing to be doing.
Oh, absolutely.
Like you can feel that energy, so you're trying to share it with everybody, which is kind of neat.
Well, and I think, and that's a huge driving force. It's my mission always is to tell people stories that you might not have known, and I find it's so important to me. Like, it is so deeply important to me. And the one place that I did an episode on that will, I think, probably forever remain at least one of my favorites. It's when I did the St. Francis Dam disaster, because so many people, A, don't talk about it, and B, don't know about it. Like kids in school here aren't taught about like the second worst like engineering disaster in California history.
Well, nobody's taught recent history in school.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's very true. And it's like, it's such a travesty to me, and so many people died. And one of like my favorite drives is that 126, when you take it all the way from like, Santa Clarita all the way out to the Ventura Beach. And that was the flood path. Like you were literally driving down where hundreds of people were swept away in the middle of the night and killed. And you don't know it. Like you just think, and the irony is all those beautiful orchards are only there because of Mulholland. Like the guy that created this, like it wouldn't be green, there wouldn't be orchards, none of this would be here if this disaster hadn't happened, or even if it had happened, it would happen, but it's all because of this one guy. And it's so crazy to me. And when I get to talk about things like that, it makes all of the hard research so worth it. And that's why I tend to do a lot of episodes of locations that no one would probably ever know about. It's probably some random house down a block in the middle of Pasadena or West Adams. And I think that's amazing. That's another thing that I love about LA is like you go down to West Adams and there's all these beautiful old homes that are just completely in decay and nobody thinks anything about it. But it's like, no, this is like, these neighborhoods are where like all of the old black like actors used to be. Like this was the rich neighborhood. Like this was Sugar Hill, and nobody knows that. Like, and there's all this amazing, beautiful history there. And it's just, it's such a beautiful gift, I think, to be able to share people's stories. And I think it's a way to exactly get them to live on in some way, because now more people know their names that wouldn't have known before.
So when you do your research, I would imagine like not all of this stuff is on the internet. You have to go delve into the libraries, don't you?
Oh yeah.
Where is your favorite stomping ground for finding?
Microfiche is her friend.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the Los Angeles Central Library. It's beautiful. It has its own weird history. There's all these like weird Masonic like things to do with it, which is really neat, and all these cool theories behind it that's fun. But they have a huge selection. Pretty much every newspaper they have, you can go back. So it gets really grueling if I can't find exact dates, so I'm having to really go through just like weeks and weeks and weeks of newspaper hoping that somebody talked about it. The good thing is they usually do, because it's news. If something horrific happens, it's news, and people historically have always loved tragic events. We can't help it. It's all of our morbid curiosity, and it's always been good media. Yeah. So I am.
It's nothing new in today's
No, absolutely
media.
not. Absolutely
it's always been
not.
sensational.
Yeah, I'm actually reading. Side note: one of the best books I've ever read about crime, called Popular Crime by Bill James. It is. If you ever want to know like people's weird obsession with serial killers and like murder, starting from like the very beginning and how it started, like this book is blowing my mind. It also has me questioning a Lizzie Borden case, which is the first time that's ever happened. So, big fan.
All right.
But yeah, so a lot of library, and honestly, I reach out to a lot of people. Like I am just completely unsolicited with like, I will ask anybody, like, do you know what's happened here? So I will find neighbors and I will find their email address and I will ask them. Like I am probably doing things you shouldn't do, but I want to know, because and other times things have been covered up or really like stayed over, and I want to know the details. Like I want to know the things they don't want you to know. Because
so you're going full on investigative reporter with this. That's awesome.
It's like a hunt. Like I get oddly obsessive.
You should see her face light up as she's talking about this, guys. Like it looks a little obsessive.
But I mean, that's the thing. Like I only met you a couple weeks ago at Comic-Con.
Yeah.
And we were on the podcasting panel together. And we were only 10 minutes or so into that podcast panel, and I was like, oh, I've got to get to know this girl. Because the passion for your subject just pours out of you the second you start talking about it. And, you know, I mean, that's why I started the show, is to talk to people about their passions, right?
Yeah.
So it was like, hands down, like, I've got to have Malia on the show. It's got to happen.
I get a lot of crap for my passion, because people think I'm obsessed with death, which is not 100% accurate. I guess you could say it's 50% accurate, because I'm obsessed with history, and I'm obsessed with historical people, and I'm obsessed with what makes people tick, why we do awful things, and the survivors. You know, and this is why I have a limit. Like I really try never to do stories that are any less than 50 years old. Like I really want to push it, because I do make very light of dark situations at times, and I'm aware that people could be survivors or have had family. And so I try to be respectful, and I also, ironically, because I am talking about the killers, people do these awful things, but I really am not a huge proponent of advertising or glorifying the people that do these. I like to talk a lot about the victims, because I think that's really important, because they're the victim. They are the one that we should be focusing on. But there's something that is just attractive, and I don't mean this in the bad sense, but there's something attractive about serial killers, people that do these things, because it's, as a normal human walking through life, it is so different than how my brain works. So it's so fascinating that what happened to you, or why do you think that's okay, and so I get obsessed. I really, really, really do get obsessed.
Well,
so.
it's interesting. You mentioned people, think that you're obsessed with death. I think there's a real problem in our culture that everybody's terrified to admit that we die.
Yeah.
My family's gone through a ton of death in the last 15 years. I have no problem talking about it. But my dad also made it very clear to me that we should not be scared to talk about death.
Yeah.
And what it means to you, and how it makes you feel, and how you respond to it, But so many people, the second you talk about death, even if it's in a positive manner, oh, hey, I want to talk to my parents about making arrangements for when they go. I've seen people go, God, why would you do that? There's just such a weird fear of it. But it's a guaranteed thing we all have to experience.
Yes.
It's been incredibly sanitized in our culture, because think about this, even the food we eat, right? Nobody thinks about the process, the slaughter of animals, things like that. So that's been sanitized and taken out. When it comes to people dying, they pass away at the hospital, you walk away, the hospital workers deal with that, and then they're taken to a morgue. One thing that my family has done for a couple of people who passed away is, I guess it's an old Irish thing, we do the death watch. When it's time for somebody to go, they come home from the hospital and everybody in the family is there to say goodbye. And it might take 48 hours. You're sitting with that person, watching them breathe their last breaths.
Yeah, we did an open casket viewing with my father, and it freaked people out.
Yeah.
And people were like, we don't do that in California. It's just not what we do. And I was like, what in the hell are you guys talking about?
There's a really...
It's a chance to say goodbye. Say goodbye.
Absolutely. And I think there's a movement happening called the positive death movement. And I think it's one of the most important things that's happening right now. And it started by a bunch of women, which I think is great. And the whole point is exactly what you said. It used to be a farm-to-table death, essentially. You killed your own animals. You died at home. Everybody saw a dead body. It was nothing new. This is a part of the life cycle. And now everything is farmed out. We don't want it. It's just, in America, I think it's a systemic problem, because even other countries are still more hands-on with it. But now, some people, if they want to, wash their mother or do any of those things, it's very weird. People say there's this thought that a dead body is contagious or diseased in some way, and I'll make you sick, which is not true at all, unless it has a contagion, and then even then it probably dies with the host. So it's just it has become an incredibly taboo thing to talk about death, and it is really an issue, because when people do pass, if they didn't want to think about it because they were too scared to think about it because they didn't accept it as part of the life cycle, they might not have made a will or told their relatives what they wanted, and then the court system gets involved and all of these awful things happen. I think it is an important conversation to have, and I don't think it has to be scary, and I think there's something liberating about owning that part of the life cycle. But it's so interesting to me how people really do are no, don't talk about it. No.
Oh yeah. Well, when my mom died, which was just 2 years ago.
Sorry.
We took all 4 of my nephews. We asked them first, do you want to say a final goodbye? Mm-hmm. And we went to the crematorium, and we said our final goodbyes to my mother on the conveyor belt. Mm-hmm. And then we all stayed in the room. Mm-hmm. And all the kids included, at that point, ages 13, 9, 7, and 6. All of us stayed in the room together and watched my mother go into the furnace, and we were there. Yeah. And accepted that this was the finality, this was it. And when we told people that my nephews were there with us, the amount of shock and just weird judgment people had about it and stuff.
Yeah.
It was really off-putting.
Yeah.
It's like these kids, their grandmother was everything in the world to them. And they paid the ultimate final respects to her by being there with her to the very final moment, you know? Like, it meant something to them.
Absolutely.
And they're not scared of the fact that she died anymore, you know?
Yeah.
They have that. It wasn't like she just disappeared.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's part of the grieving process.
You know?
Yeah.
Yes.
People just vanish at the hospital. You never see them again. Now there's an urn.
Well,
you know?
and the idea of being present at their death, whether it's, you know, when they pass or, you know, whenever you're putting them, you know, cremation or burial, it's not, I mean, it is for you in a sense because it's that closure, but it's also, I mean, yes, we all die alone technically, right? But to be there, to be present with them, and at least like, so I think of most recently my grandfather passing and everybody, aunts, uncles, nephews, brothers, sisters. There was 20 people in my grandma's living room. And yeah, my grandpa was already to the point where he may or may not have known that we were present there. I tend to believe that he probably did in some way. But my grandmother had 20 people there supporting her as the man that she had lived with for 40-something years passed out of this life. And that's the more important thing. That's like the collective presence of your family, being able to do that. And I think, yeah, like you were saying, we've sort of sanitized that, right? Like people don't necessarily, you know, you get the phone call, somebody passed away, or, you know, and sometimes you just can't be there. But if you can, I think it's really important to have that closure and to be present.
Absolutely.
Present in death.
Well, it's also knowing your rights. A lot of people don't know you can be in the room when a cremation happens. You can push the button if you want to. A lot of people think you have to be outside. That's not true. Yeah, a lot of people don't know that because a lot of funeral homes don't tell you can't. And I think that's a real big issue. And there's actually a place in Colorado that is doing pyres. You can be burned on a pyre, and like the family can help build the pyre, and it's a whole ceremony. And so many people across the country heard about this and want this for themselves or for family members, but they've had to like limit it to the residents that are in this town. But I think it's this amazing example of when more options are presented to us and we're kind of like, okay, wait, that's kind of a neat idea. It's an ancient idea, but it gives you this feeling of empowerment. It's giving you your rights back. Because I think we feel very like we don't have a choice. Well, it's this option or this option. It doesn't have to be the case because nobody's talking about it. Right. Nobody's too scared to talk about it. We don't know there's other options that might fit for us more spiritually or actually make us feel more at peace with the fact that our lives end. So I think that's literally, I guess you could say I'm obsessed with death in the sense that I'm terrified of it. I am probably more terrified of it than most people. And this entire thing is, yes, to raise awareness of people that have passed and tell their stories, but I'm also desperately trying to find my own peace because I don't have it yet. So these things are important to me to learn. Like I'm trying to break my own mental taboo of talking about death by immersing myself in it deeply.
I think it gets easier the older you get too.
I feel like it'd almost be the opposite.
No. My own discovery on all that has been the older I get, the closer I'm faced with the reality that my days forward are growing shorter. And that moment is getting closer and closer every day. So there's a reality of death that comes as you get older that makes it easier to talk about because it is just a fucking reality that you're not gonna, you can't hide from it. It's gonna happen.
Yeah.
You know? And I think when you're younger, because you have potentially so much life ahead of you, like the last thing you want to talk about is when it comes to a close, you know?
True.
I think it's more terrifying when you're younger because you feel like you have so much life to live that somehow talking about the finality of it is like betraying the life that you have ahead of you still.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think again, I think there's issues with that because unfortunately, death doesn't discriminate.
No.
Like when it's your time, and it doesn't care how old you are. Like none of us are born with it. Like what's the word I'm looking for?
Expiration date.
Yes, exactly. Like
at least that we know of.
Yeah, we're not like guaranteed 80 years, 90 years.
Yeah.
It's like no, you got to live in wondering. You'll know when you know, but you're not going to know ahead of time, kind of a thing. And I think it is great to live in the present, but I think this is something that we should absolutely be talking about to our children. I think it's important for kids to understand this. And I went to an incredible panel with the women that started the Order of the Good Death, with like the people that started the positive death movement. And a child got up and asked a question. And she was like, I think her father had died. And she was just asking for advice because as a kid, nobody wanted to talk to her about it.
Right.
So here this kid came to this panel of women to ask them, how do I handle this? Because no one in her circle is talking to her about it. Because, you're a child, you don't have to worry about these things. It's like, because you're preparing them for that. It's to me, I think about it as the same as teaching abstinence. Teach them safe sex, just in case. Yeah. You can still teach them abstinence, but also give them plan Bs. Not necessarily plan B, but give them plan Bs,
Well, and there's weird things when somebody dies and you've got to explain it to a child. Like, I've heard people say, he's sleeping, he's just sleeping.
That's a really weird thing to say.
Worst thing to tell a kid.
Yeah.
Because then they're terrified to go to bed.
That's so true.
Because they don't have the ability to discern the difference between sleep death and going to sleep for the night.
That's very true.
It's like
I never thought
by trying to cushion it, you're making it worse for them.
Yeah.
And I think an open dialogue where you're honest with a child about what death really means is really important.
Well, and again, let's put it in perspective. This is a new thing because back in the day, kids would have seen the death.
Right.
It would have been in their living room on display for a while.
Slaughtered their own sheep.
Absolutely. We are living in a coddled nation, and like people think it's so creepy because I'm obsessed with mourning.
Well, it's a coddled world.
It's a coddled world. It's very true. Like I think one of my favorite things is postmortem photography, and a lot of people think that's so creepy. Would you want that? It's like no. You have to understand at this time, so many families lost so many children. The majority of them are children. This is the only photo or proof they would have had of their child, and to them, this wasn't weird or creepy. This was a way of preserving their child. Yeah, I think it's beautiful.
Memoriam.
Absolutely, and people get so
they only had their child for a tiny period of time. Our memories aren't rock solid.
No.
They want that photo to remember what their child looked like.
Well, and consider they would have had to pay back then quite a bit of money. Like that meant a lot to them to take that much finance out to have this one photo.
Mm-hmm. That's why I think the Victorian era in general, the Victorian era then turning into the spiritualist movement is my favorite moment of American history because they were the most immersed in death than I think we ever have been. As far as you have the hair art, you have the postmortem photography, you have literally a dress in your closet strictly for mourning, and then you have the spiritualist movement where everyone's trying to still commune with the dead. There was this very open, you're accepting death in its most intense form, and then everything starts changing and things start getting factoried out, and all of that goes away. I think the wars had a huge thing to do with that as well because it was on a bigger scale, but it's a shame to me that there was art in death back then, and now it's nothing.
I wonder a little bit too how much of the modern era's death happens behind closed doors, it's hidden away from you, is a result of World War II, where so many soldiers were traumatized by seeing so much death.
True.
That when they came home, the last thing they wanted was to ever see somebody die.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point.
Because modern medicine kind of grew up in the shadow of World War II.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder how much World War II influenced this kind of current trend of hiding death from everybody.
And that would have been if that is true, it would have been interesting how they would have done that, because PTSD and stuff was not really something they even considered back then. Yeah. And it was said with a great assault, I got shell shock, it's taken us so long to really accept how much death can affect a person, especially tragic death over and over and over. That is really good. And now I'm really curious about looking that up.
That would be an interesting thesis to write, like the trajectory of that.
That's really fascinating.
So I was going to ask you, in reference to, as we've been talking about this, the sanitation of death, and then the fact that you said you have this fear of it to a degree. Do you feel like doing this research has helped to calm those fears, like in finding that maybe, like experientially and historically, you found that maybe there is something more, like we don't quite know what that something is, but does that give you hope that like we're not just our corporal shell and that there's something?
Absolutely. I think every single time I research a place and the history adds up with the sightings, or the sightings and the experiences led me to find the history, and it all kind of matches up, especially if the people claiming something had no idea of the history. It's very validating to me, and I also have met so many people that have had such incredible personal experiences, people that were hardcore non-believers, and it brings me incredible peace, because the fear for me obviously is, maybe not obviously, my fear is that there's nothing afterwards.
I think that's a lot of people's
absolutely fear. And I was raised, I guess you could say, universalist is probably the closest thing you could say. My dad was more Hindu. My parents wanted to kind of raise me with my own, like, you figure it out. Like, here's different literature, but we're not going to peg you as something, which I think was a blessing and a curse, because I have great envy of people that can go into a church or have a book or a God specifically that they can pray to or find peace in. It's like, okay, this is it. Heaven's real. I believe this wholeheartedly. There is a peace in that, I believe.
And being a firm believer.
Yes, that I do not know, and I don't believe I will ever know, because I was raised questioning, and I am so curious by nature that I would have a hard time if it's down to a book, I'm going to question the book. Like, that's just how I'm wired.
Who wrote this?
Absolutely.
What's the interpretation of it?
Exactly.
How many revisions of this have I?
Absolutely.
You might enjoy going to temple. Like, that's part of like the Jewish faith is like discussion, and
I have a lot of my Jewish friends. I talk with them in depth, because I love talking religion with people, because I love to hear it, learn it from people, hear what they believe, and always kind of hoping something sticks. And I've actually found a lot of peace in like things that click. So I do have my own beliefs that I've kind of pieced together, and it's interesting because I get a lot of people asking me. I have a lot of very Christian and Catholic friends, and I've had very serious conversations with them. They've legitimately worried about my soul. Like, are you worried about what you do, keeping you from, say, entering heaven or something? And I'm kind of like, you know what? I have read a lot of religious texts. I have a lot of religious friends. And I can't say I believe in your God the way you believe your God to be, but the one thing you kind of start realizing when you look at religion as a whole is it all is very similar. And I think at the end of the day, I live my life as a good person. No, I am not worried about it. Thank you for being worried about my soul. I'm okay with it. But
in the end, Jews, Muslims, and Christians all believe in the same core God. It's just different views on prophets.
Exactly. And religion's its own interesting thing, but I do believe, and I've actually found a lot of peace talking to other religious people about their own experiences, because a lot of them are very open-minded in spirituality, and both of my friends have had experiences that have completely contradicted with what they believed, and that's rocked them. And I always pay attention to that, because like if you grew up hardcore believing this and then something actually happened to you, you weren't asking for that. You weren't seeking it, because obviously you go into something wanting to see it. You can like, what was that? Oh, I definitely saw a shadow, that definitely moved. You can picture everything you want to picture. But
it's so easy to just brush off stuff as God's will too.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that religion oftentimes to me is really limiting on what God's capable of doing. Because it's just about defining what you want it to define, as opposed to God is more than just your particular experience of the universe.
Well, and I feel like that is a huge thing with it. I think people have put those limitations on it, because again, it's all up for interpretation. It's, science and God can't exist in the same universe. Why not?
For me, I found all my spirituality ultimately. I mean, I'm a born-again Christian. I went to a Baptist university. But in the end, I found my spirituality in science.
Interesting.
You know, in the idea that we're all star stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and all of the matter and energy in the universe started from the same point.
And we're all intertwined.
Yeah. It's a miracle. I mean, it really is.
Your existence is a miracle. Whether you believe in a God or the Big Bang, it doesn't matter. It doesn't change the fact that a miracle happened and all these things came together at the appropriate time for you to spring into existence.
Yeah. We're a statistical anomaly.
It really is mind-blowing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And for me, the science of it all is what gives me definition to my existence. And whether there's a heaven or a hell, I don't believe in either one. Mm-hmm. I believe when we die, our energy is reabsorbed back into the universe.
See, that also terrifies me. I find a lot of comfort in reincarnation.
But if you look at the universe, it's birth, life, death.
Oh, absolutely.
Rebirth from the death.
Yeah.
Constantly. The stars do it. Mm-hmm. The galaxies all do it. Right? Every single piece of matter in the universe goes through the same cycle. Why not our energy, our spirit, our soul?
Yeah.
Why doesn't it do the same thing?
Well, and where do you hang out until you get your rebirth, too?
Well, see, that's my biggest thing, and this is, so I think I'm less concerned about my soul, or it's more me preserving my memories. So I do believe in reincarnation and multiple life cycles. I've come across too many cases that are just unexplainable to me without believing in reincarnation of sorts and multiple lives. For me, the idea of dying and not having any memory of this life is what scares me the most. And for me, what I have kind of come to believe is I believe when you die and you're no longer limited by this consciousness, you can remember everything you've ever lived in every form you ever had. So you can come and visit the people that know you in this life as the form they remember you as. But you could have been their brother in another life or another time. So that's to me what's, as I'm growing older, that's kind of what I'm holding on to a little bit, is kind of that belief, because I definitely believe people are visited by loved ones, and I always think that's very interesting. And one of the things that I've experienced personally, but a lot of people I know have experienced, is grandparents coming to grandchildren. And that's what I hear more. I hear that more than even parents to children. It's grandparents to children. And I don't know what that is about, but it's what I've experienced, it's what a lot of friends have experienced. And so I think there has to be something as far as just like a comfort. Maybe it's this, like, the older, the matriarch of the family having to like tell the youngest, like, no, we're good, we're here, like, you're fine. You know, I don't know what that is, but that fascinates me a lot, because I run into that a lot of people experiencing that.
Yeah, it's interesting. When my parents died, both of them, I had the same experience with both of them, in that I didn't feel crap, like nothing. I didn't feel their spirit energy leave. I didn't, again, I don't feel that stuff.
Yeah.
But I had so many friends and my dad's been gone now for almost 11 years. My mom's been gone for 2. And I've got friends to this day who are still like, oh, hey, your dad visited me in a dream last month, or your mom visited me in a dream and told me I need to, cheer up and keep moving, I'm like, apparently they're visiting all my friends in their sleep.
What does that mean? Do you want that? Like, do you feel like you're missing something with that?
No, because, again, for me, with the way I've grown to believe with the string theory and the science of us all being connected, I am the embodiment of their memory in the universe. Mm-hmm. So I don't need to feel them.
Yeah.
They're part of me. And they'll always be a part of me.
Yeah.
Just the way I'm sitting here talking to you right now. My dad used to sit like this. I'm the echo of my father.
Yeah.
And my mom had crazy notions of stuff and a weird sense of humor, and so do I. And every day I'm reminded that I'm an echo of her. I don't need to feel their spirit energy to know that they're a part of my life. Right? And they're
that's a beautiful
and
way
they will
to look
always
at
be
it.
a part of my existence.
Yeah.
And getting again to science, like with quantum theories and
were you going for quantum entanglement there?
going into entanglement.
Makes my mind explode.
Yeah, but if you want to talk about all of us as energy in the universe, what's to say that the energy of a grandparent through quantum entanglement can't have communication with their grandchild?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I remember specifically physics class in high school when they introduced us to quantum physics. And I remember specifically when my teacher was like, nothing is solid. And I remember just being like, I literally was like, what? What do you mean? Like the table in front of you is not solid. And I started banging on it.
It's
I'm
all
like,
vibrations.
yes, it is. I'm like, it's solid. And he's like, no, it's not. You're just perceiving it that way. And I'm like, I walked out of class because my mind was hurting.
Well, and you know, you don't experience now.
Yeah,
ever,
it just
right? Because there's a time delay between light hitting your eyes and the interpretation of it. So every moment that you're thinking you're in the present, you're actually looking at the past.
Cue Malia's existential crisis.
It's amazing, right? The universe is incredible. And so like I say, I don't feel those things, but I don't discredit anybody who does.
Yeah.
You know, and whether they feel that it's a spirit or an energy or an apparition or whatever, like to me, it's all possible and it's all valid, you know? And I think it's incredible. The universe is amazing.
Well, and if we get into the fact that time is not actually linear, then you can really talk about like, are spirits something that is conscious? Is it a reverberation of energy?
Absolutely.
Is it some combination of those? Are we experiencing a bend in time?
The harmony of life energy through the string theory.
And I feel like that makes so much sense. Because when you think about it, I think we're just living right now on one plane, if you will, but all of these things are happening simultaneously. And
well, in our physical existence, we can only go one direction through time.
Yeah.
But once we poof into energy and we go into whatever spirit world or the quantum realm or whatever, like the laws change. You know?
And getting back to what you asked of where do we go until we reincarnate, for me, that is one of the biggest questions, whatever that limbo is. Because there's a part of me that feels like, well, wouldn't it be instantaneous? Is my soul right now also projecting to something else right now and like going and visiting somebody else? Like that starts my mind exploding. But
well, and think of this. Does your soul connect to the future version of you as well as the past version of you at the same time?
Sweet Lord, yeah. Who knows? I do, it's interesting, people, the one thing that I've always been most envious about, back to like my obsession with being envious of people that have religious hardcore beliefs, is the idea of heaven. I devoutly do not believe in a hell. I believe in bad spirits. I do not know if I would call them demons. I'm fascinated by the idea of demonic presence.
Yeah.
But I do not believe in a fiery pit that is hell. I do firmly believe if there was a hell, I think we might be in it. But I do believe that there might be some...
The devil has a presence and he's got orange hair.
Yeah, seriously. But I feel like that's a whole other story and a whole other conversation.
Yeah, let's not go there.
Yeah, so true.
It'll bring bad juju on us.
Exactly. But I do think that, I hope that there is a life cycle ending through multiple. I think there has to be a point of life. I do believe that our spirits are trying to get to an ultimate zen or peaceful state. And I find my proof in, when I was a kid, until I was like a preteen, I was in and out of children's hospitals a lot for like a weird vertigo thing that I had. They did all these weird experiments on me. And so I was constantly in children's hospitals, constantly seeing these kids that were dying or in treatment. And none of them looked terrified. There was a peace and serenity to them. And I literally believe that they're at the end of their life cycle. As tragic as that is, I think they are only here for short periods of time because they have learned as much as they could, and now they are here to teach.
Yeah, they don't need any more time.
They don't need any more time. So I think, and I think maybe after that is when you ascend to whatever that ultimate...
The next phase of your...
The next phase, yeah. I want to believe that. That's what I would like to believe. There is a place that we will all eventually go to where all of our past selves are there. You know, we remember everything, we can recognize other souls, and we're having a glass of wine and chilling. That would be great. That's the one I want.
Have you ever seen the movie What Dreams May Come?
Oh, such a good dream.
I don't think I actually ever have seen
need
that.
to see that movie.
I was going to say that
Robin
earlier.
Williams, Cuba Gooding Jr., Max von Sydow.
I've heard of this.
It's a really excellent film.
Amazing.
It's going to make me kill myself.
It's the most
crying.
metaphysical movie like I've ever seen.
Oh,
But yeah, when you were talking about hell, it made me think of that movie because essentially what the premise in that film is that we sort of create our own version of heaven or hell. And so like if you think yourself a bad person, you're going to send yourself somewhere bad.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I think, and that's another thing about
It's such an incredible film. Like,
I think that I gotta have to see that.
It's mind-blowing. It's beautiful.
Beautifully shot,
It's wonderfully performed.
I mean, Robin Williams, you don't get better. That's why I'm like worried to watch that. Because
you'll
cry so hard.
cry.
I can't even watch Hook yet.
Just get into it.
You'll definitely cry, especially knowing how he died. Like, you'll cry, but it's such a good cry. Like, I took my mom to watch it. And she had lost her fiance in a car accident in the mid-90s, and she had a real hard time coping with it. And the movie came out 99, 2000, around that time.
Okay.
So he'd been gone for 8 years at that point. She was still just totally torn up about it. And I took her to see that movie, and she cried through the entire film. But when she walked out, she felt so much better.
Interesting. I love films like that. I think art should make you feel something for sure.
Yeah.
But I do think it was interesting what you said. If you believe yourself to be a bad person, you're going to be a bad person. And one of the things when it going back to like serial killers, H.H. Holmes has always been an obsession of mine. And I'm always fascinated. I always think back to his quote of, "I was born with the devil inside of me." And I'm never, the one thing I'm always searching for when I'm researching serial killers is I almost get pissed when they say something like I was born evil or something, because to me it's like they're copping out. Like you're making up an excuse as to why. Like you're
taking
the
your
victim.
control away.
Yeah, like you're the victim to your own habits, or you were born a certain way. And I'm on the fence about it because I think it might be true. And I'm also like, no, take responsibility. You chose to be that way. You took those actions. You decided to do those things. You built a murder castle.
So, okay, I have another thing that you should read. You'd probably enjoy. So there's this book series that my mom read, and she gave it to me. It's called Conversations with God. And it's interesting because the guy who wrote it, he said, he was an author, but he had been pondering over, existential, what is my life? Is there a God? And he started writing down, like, if he ever got to meet God, these are the questions I'd ask him. And so he started just writing down, and he said that in the middle of the night, he would get up and he'd start writing answers to them. Now, I don't know if this was like sleepwalking, getting up in the middle of the night, but he said he's like, I felt like I was auto-writing. He's like, I was not really that present. And so he wrote this series of books that were responses to his questions. And one of the things, so I'll connect it back to the serial killers, and also you said that you saw a lot of kids. The question was, why are there children who are born with maladies? Why are there sickness? And the response was that as a soul, you choose your challenges because those are the challenges that will help you grow. And so I wonder, in regards to the serial killers, if the challenge is, you're born with this in you, your challenge is to do better. And
they failed. They're failing.
They're failing hard. They're failing real hard.
That's a really interesting spin on it.
I think you'd really enjoy the book series.
It sounds fantastic.
Of course, this is like one man's theory, and he in the series, like he's connecting it to children who have terminal illnesses and huge challenges. But it just made, when you said the serial killer thing, I'm like, that kind of works there. They're failing hard. But then again, they say that 1 in 10 people is a sociopath. So there are definitely some sociopaths out there that aren't serial killers. They're like CEOs.
That's
so
true.
Somebody's not failing hard.
That's a solid point.
Looking at you, Elon Musk.
Yeah.
My grandfather and my dad had a conversation once. My grandfather was a Christian, high-level member of his church, part of the Masons, like high-level Mason. And I remember my dad had a conversation with him about spirituality and belief, and my dad said, well, I believe in reincarnation, and my grandfather says, well, so do I. My dad goes, well, Jesus, okay, you know, I get it. And my grandfather goes, no. Like, I believe in reincarnation. We come back. My dad says, how do you believe that? That's like not normal, really, for a Christian.
Yeah.
My grandfather says, I'm a school teacher. I'm a music teacher. You tell me how a 4-year-old can sit down at a piano and play Beethoven without ever having seen sheet music or been taught how to play a piano. There's only one explanation for that.
Yeah.
They learned that before.
I used to nanny for a little kid he was about 4 and could play guitar, he could play piano, he could play the sax, and played blues music.
Whoa.
Loved blues music. I'm like, who were you before?
Yeah, no, seriously.
His parents, the same thing too. Like they wouldn't talk about it, but like one day I was talking to the parents and I'm like, yeah, he's really talented. And I just sort of did one of those and they're like, yeah, we think so. And like, I didn't even have to say what we were talking about. And they're like, yeah.
My grandfather just said to my dad, he said, I feel like there are lessons we're supposed to learn in our lives, and we don't always do it in one go.
Yeah. It's so fascinating.
Well, and there's
My grandfather was like in his 60s when he had that conversation with my dad. My dad was in his 40s, you know? Like they were having that conversation really late in life.
Yeah.
So it was like mind-blowing to my dad to think that, oh my gosh, my father all this time has been really open-minded about things.
Yeah, that would be a mind blow for sure.
Well, and so no offense, but it's kind of presumptive to think that, you know, Christians can't believe that because there definitely is places.
I'm not saying they can't, but many of them don't.
Well,
they limit it, again, they limit it to specific prophets and Jesus.
But consider this, there are, based on interpretation of scripture, there are definitely places both in the Christian Bible and in Jewish scripture that definitely account for reincarnation.
Yep.
Now, it's not like in every case, it's kind of like special cases, but it's not outside the limits.
No, it's not. Not if you're educated in your belief.
Yeah.
If you're taking it at face value, you kind of thinking, yeah, I get what
But a lot of people aren't really educated up on their beliefs.
But it also, it's...
There's a lot of Christians who've never read the whole Bible.
Scripture is very open to interpretation.
That too.
So there's that.
Yes, absolutely.
I think I always thought it was really interesting when people, one of my favorite examples, I'm trying to like formulate my thought here, of the idea of God, and we can't be more than God, which I always thought was a preposterous idea because if God created us, how could we outsmart him? Like that didn't make any sense to me. It's like, wouldn't it have all been in the master plan anyways? I love, if you look at old art, especially pieces of medieval and Renaissance art, there's a flaw in everything.
Yeah.
Because the artists never want to be more perfect than God. So you see this beautiful stained glass.
Deal too.
Yeah. You see this beautiful stained glass window and they'll have like a little crack in it with a different color. Like
Tiny little blue triangle.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because it has to have that flaw. Because it cannot be more perfect than God. Because only God is perfect.
I never realized that.
Yeah. I think that is so fascinating. And it's also like, that's not something that's really practiced as much today. I think artists are all striving for perfection. It's like, when did that start?
Well, it's in a weird, I think a lot of it's the digital world we live in.
Yeah, you can't really do a little aquamarine triangle.
That'd be a really neat tip of the hat, though, you know?
That's
for
true.
artists who are aware of that.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, even in our filmmaking, like I'm okay with a kind of slightly jiggled camera, you know, or if you're doing a dolly move or something, you got a little bump and the camera moves a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm okay with little imperfections in my films like that.
Yeah.
It makes it feel like there's a human being behind the camera.
Absolutely.
Sometimes those imperfections become the happy accidents, you know?
That's so true. Yeah,
Absolutely.
and not like a robot did it.
I think the drive for absolute perfection in everything is folly.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so we've talked a lot, extensively about spirituality. This is really a mind twister. I'm going to bring it back to the ghosties, though. What is, for your show, what is your white whale? What would be a place that you would love to go and investigate and do the research on?
Oh my Lord,
Tell me it's a boat so we can keep with the white whale theme.
Now me and the Queen Mary do not get along very well at all.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
What's the story there?
Oh boy. So my entire life I have had a deep deep fear of the ocean. And not just like, oh, it's like I love swimming. It's not the water. It's I cannot see things capsized. I physically get ill. I cannot see boats overturned. I can't see anything. Titanic is something that I can't even think about. I'm obsessed with it, but it's really hard for me to handle. The one and only seance I've ever went to seemed like complete bogus. The only person that got a very extensive reading was me, and I was pulled out, and the lady had me come to the table, and she's like, do you have a fear of boats? I'm like, yes, I do. She's like, you were on the Titanic. Like, just straight, and then she started shaking and crying, and it was this weird, long read, and nobody else got it. There was 50 people in this room. It was very odd. But so there's just always been this connection between me and the water, and that being said, of course, I'm obsessed with it. And I love the Queen Mary. I think it's beautiful. It's the closest you can get to being on the Titanic. I'm obsessed with the White Star Line. It's gone through so much. It was the Great Ghost. It was all of these things. So I go whenever I can. Every time I'm there, I get very sick and disoriented. It's hard for me to walk down the hallways. And when I was with my mom, we went and had tea. And this may be the only actual apparition I've seen. If it was one of the oddest things I've ever experienced. I was walking down, so you have to go back, you can tour the main part of the ship, and then if you want to go see the engine room, you have to kind of go out of the ship, walk down this weird, extended hallway, and then go back in. And we saw the engine room, which was hard. That's one of the most active spots in the entire place, and it feels very heavy. I got out of there pretty fast. So I'm walking through the museum part, and I kid you not, there was an old man, he looked like an old ship captain, and no one's walking around dressed. Like, it's not like there's dressed Dawsons walking around the Queen Mary ushering you to spots. But he was standing in front of a doorway, looked like something completely out of the early 20th century. And he just goes, have you been in this room yet? And it was my mom and I were like, oh no. And then he was like, you should go in this room. And then he just continued on. And we're like, oh, I wonder if there's a special exhibit in there. Like, literally had no idea. I walked in there, and it was the propeller room, where the propeller's underwater. So it's like you're partially under the ship, which I can't handle. And I collapsed. Like, it was so jarring to me. And I have been plagued by this ever since it happened. So I'm like, who was this man? Why did he, like, of all the places, why, even, like, it just made no sense to me. I'm like, why usher me into this?
Additionally, even if he was a ghost, why is he fucking with you? That's not cool.
Yeah, there's so many things to it. So that was, across the board, one of my oddest experiences, because I can't say what it was. He was 100% solid, but he didn't seem, like, he seemed like he was in the right place, but not for the current time period. And I've never seen, because I've been there so many times at this point, I made myself go back to film an episode there, and I made myself walk in the room again, and it took 3 tries, and I filmed the whole thing, because I was like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to get in here. But yeah, so me and ships don't really get along, especially the Queen Mary.
So you filmed on the Queen Mary already once, so you've already caught that whale.
Yes.
So what's another thing that, like, you would really love to do?
There is there's the Vasilla Axe Murder House, which I would love to do. I would love to go to Massachusetts. Massachusetts probably number 1. I would love to explore the hell out of Boston and Salem. I think there is just so much tragedy there, and so many stories, and not just because of the witch trials. I want to talk about everybody else that was happening at the time. There's so much history there. So that's
early colonial U.S.
Absolutely.
Full of
craziness.
Crazy, weird, horrible stories.
And it's so fascinating, just like endlessly fascinating. So I couldn't pinpoint exactly where. My dream with my show is to do regions. So I want to take each season be a road trip, and I've always wanted to just get in the car, have my road trip mapped out, but with the luxury of time to stop off in a local pub, bar, whatever, and ask the locals what their scary stories are. Because I want to know the local scary stories. And then I want to go find those stories. So there's just so much in this country to go see and explore. But top dream would be Hampton Court in England.
Hampton Court, all right.
Hampton Court, that is deeply, Henry VIII is one of my favorite historical figures. so fascinated by how great and awful he was simultaneously, that and that place is such an ever-changing center point to his history, that, oh my God, I was just in Sydney, Australia, and in the Shakespeare Room in the State Library is an exact replica of the ceiling at Hampton Court. And I walked in and I saw it and I'm like, this is everything.
You were super excited. I watched that episode.
Way too excited. So that's probably if I had the budget of my dreams right now, I'd be like, get me to Hampton Court, get me full access.
Right, you've put that into the universe.
Yeah, you put
Things
it out
have happened with this show.
Yeah.
People put stuff out in the universe on this show, and suddenly, miraculously, shit happens.
True enough.
You put that out. Season 4 is England.
Oh God, yeah, it'd be fantastic.
Macabre Mondays in England.
That's the dream. That would be the dream. It is. What's really interesting to me is they call it the morbid community, which is, it's weird when you start doing weird, like, niche things, the terms you start hearing. And LA doesn't have a huge morbid community. It's a lot of East Coast based and a lot of England based. I have more opportunities to film on the East Coast and in England than I can get in LA.
Yeah.
People are real weird about it here.
Yeah.
Real weird
I feel like here, like, there's been weird shit that's happened here, but I feel like they kind of keep it a little quieter. One prime example that I think of, and I'm curious if you would ever have an opportunity, the Cecil Hotel.
My favorite. I did a 2-part episode on it.
You did a 2-part episode on it. How was that?
So I lie a lot of the times to try to get into places because I really wanted to get in the elevator and I wanted to explore the hotel. There is more security in that hotel than I've ever seen. So I was not allowed access. I went in and my cover was that I was a college student and I'm an architecture major and I'm doing a paper on Art Deco architecture in Los Angeles, and I really wanted to explore the hotel. They did everything as far as calling the manager to ask if I could have permission to just walk around, because I would sneak any footage that I could, and they wouldn't allow it. So I have often thought about getting myself a room there so I can get through the security, because they have metal detectors.
I thought they were closed now. Have they opened it back up?
Yeah, they're still, they actually might be closed right now, because they just sold it and they're going to renovate the whole thing.
Well, it's been closed for a couple of years now, I think. So
it was open for sure about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's when I did the episode on it. So it was weird. I mean, the whole place feels weird, and it was the only location that I would not go by myself.
I wouldn't go there by myself either.
Yeah.
So what is the history you found on that place? Because I've heard a lot of the stories, but I haven't actually taken the effort to deeply research.
Women have a funny way of going there to die. So about 4 women have gone there to jump out windows and kill themselves. Mm-hmm. Very oddly. Elisa Lam is probably the most famous case.
She's the most recent one also.
Tank. Yep.
So,
this is the water tank.
Yeah, if you guys don't know this story, so there was a woman, I believe she was from China.
She was from Vancouver, BC.
Oh, Vancouver. So she was visiting, and the last footage you see of her, she's in the hotel elevator, and then nobody could find her for like a couple months. When they found her, her body was in a sealed water tank, and people in the hotel had been showering in her
and drinking.
And drinking her body, which was decomposing. And that's how they found her, is because people started complaining, the water smells weird.
And it gets a step stranger.
Story.
It's so strange. And the thing that adds the cap on it is a lot of the residents, because it's low-income housing as well as a hotel. A lot of them end up getting a weird chest form of tuberculosis, like another type of tuberculosis, and the test they run to check you for that is called Lam Elisa. Her name's Elisa Lam, so it's her name reversed.
Weird. Did the body have tuberculosis? No. Okay.
But so Richard Ramirez used to stay there while he was on his murder spree of this area. Also, there was a copycat killer. We're in Pasadena. We're also, his copycat killer went there and stayed. There's only been one man killed on the property, and that was from a falling body of a woman as she jumped out the building and crushed him to death. It's just, there's a lot of theories because the hotel was originally built for businessmen coming in on the trains, and it was a men's only hotel. And kind of as soon as they started allowing women were drawn there from every walk of life, usually not poor women, to stay at this very low income hotel, and just decided to kill themselves there. And so there's some theories of their, and I can't find any evidence to back it up, but I find it kind of like an amusing theory of there used to be a satanic cult that would practice in the basement of when it was men only that would do female sacrifices. And maybe that is why women are drawn there. Whatever the case is, it is just not a place I would recommend a woman to go by herself. And nobody knows why the girl from Vancouver came down in the first place. She just kind of came down. This college student came down, stayed, and they still don't know how she got in the water tank. There's literally a quote from a cop saying some things aren't meant to be figured out. It was so weird. They just have no alarms were tripped. It is so bizarre.
Yeah, it's just
so
like
bizarre.
A gap in the footage of elevator, nothing.
Well, and there's obviously the way because it's like a 3-minute clip of her in this elevator, and she's in the back of it, and she keeps peeking out of it as if she's like hiding from something. She does all these weird hand motions with her hands, and the doors keep opening and closing, like as if something's walking through it, but nothing's happening. Oh. It's so trippy. It's really, really, really trippy.
And then, of course, so this is the same hotel that they based the American Horror Story hotel off of.
Yes. It is, I think, one of the best locations in LA for creepy, weird, everything. It's so weird. I'm kind of obsessed with it.
Well, if they open it back up, like, part of me would want to go stay there, not by myself.
Oh, no.
To hell no.
Yeah, no.
But I that's one of my morbid curiosities. I'm like, what's up with this place?
Well, it's just, I've thought about revisiting it because I still have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And I spent a month of research before I did that episode, and I still feel like there's something there that I'm missing because it's just too coincidental. Why so many women, wild jumping? All of it just doesn't seem right. Oh, and a woman was stabbed to death repeatedly and raped in the building.
Well, and is there some connection to the Black Dahlia murder there as well?
One of many. I don't really believe there's any truth behind it because you can look up any hotel in LA, and that was the last place she was seen in the bar. That's just one of the many places that she was supposedly seen at the bar before she was killed.
Well, it's also just good, PR for every place to say that, this is the last place.
Absolutely.
One final question.
Yes.
How long does it usually take you to prep an episode before you feel comfortable to go shoot it? Because I've watched a few of your episodes now, and you're really detailed in the history of the places you go.
I appreciate that. Thank you. It is usually anywhere from, it depends on what kind of lengths I have to go to for research, but usually around a month I spend on each location. And it's an incredibly frustrating process because I never feel like I've done enough research. Because there's been a few times I've done an episode on something and then I'll hear a tip from something and I'm like, what? No, how did I miss that? And it's infuriating to me because I feel like I try to tell the most complete story I can I'll
do like a supplemental episode every season. Macabre Monday updates.
I will have to because there's been a few that I've needed to update and I just haven't. But yeah, it takes quite a while. And Australia was very frustrating for me because the entire trip got switched around and I just fit in so many locations into each episode that I knew going into it, I can't do the amount of research I want to do on. I think I did 30 locations while I was there. So it was infuriating for me because I feel like I know I just scrape the tip of the iceberg in all of these because it's my tendency to want to go as deep as possible. But yeah, it's usually a month of on-off, like when I can get to it, research or dedicating some days to it. If in a perfect world, if this was my full-time gig, it'd probably take me about a week of just every day, all day, hitting everything I needed to hit, and I could probably do it.
Well, I really enjoyed the episodes that I've seen so far. I'm going to go into the back catalog and get all caught up before you drop another season. You just finished season 3, right?
It's kind of open-ended.
Okay.
Season 3 is kind of like a weird mishmash of stuff.
Well, where can everybody go to see your episodes and
Absolutely.
get caught up?
On my YouTube. That's probably the easiest place. So just youtube.com/Malia Miglino. Or you could just Google Macabre Mondays and everything you see will be mine. So any of those links will take you to the YouTube.
Excellent.
All right.
It's been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is very interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
It was a blast.
It was a long drive up here to meet with you, but it was one that I felt like we had to do.
Oh, thank you so much. I really
glad we
appreciate
did.
it. Thank you.
Thanks.